Okay, just bear with me on this. Yeah, I'll make some sense of it all. Scenarios like this play out all the time around the world, let alone America. Where you have a conversation, one elderly person will be saying, well, I always do that on Mondays. And the other person will turn around and say, yes. And so that's when we'll do that, is next Monday. But today is Monday. No, it isn't. We did that, went there and did that yesterday. Today is Tuesday. Well, no, I always do that on Mondays. Yeah, I know, but so today is Tuesday. Well, it can't be. I need to do that today. No, you do that on Mondays. You can do it next Monday. That's next week. You did it yesterday already. No, I didn't do it yesterday. I always do it on Mondays. Those kind of scenarios, and it's just a vague listening in on a conversation, play out all the time in an elderly situation. Could be about different things, could be whatever, but it plays out all the time. Just in aging alone, let alone onset of dementia or cognitive behavior, where the person refuses to acknowledge a time-space reality. That's what it comes down to. The disconnect, as I call it. And I need to say that because we have that situation playing out in a very real way right now. And I don't think it's being talked about or told, and rightly so, because of the echelon, the tier that it may be playing out in. And it's not necessarily a bad thing when it happens. It's just it's one of those things that needs to be acknowledged. I've known people that were sharp as a tack that were elderly. Except there was a disconnect in a time-space reality that kept getting deeper and bigger and wider every week, year, month, whatever it may be, that they got older. Okay? And when that plays out, it has to be recognized. We're seeing it play out and it's so saddening to watch. But it's hard to watch because I know it's being played out, but I don't know where and how all the lines are, and who's actually, someone's being played about it, that's for sure. But we'll go back to this disconnect. Okay? You can't tell me that there's a disconnect between Trump, our President Trump, his cabinet, the public and civil organization. Okay? There's an obvious disconnect between those things. And it shows up with each passing incident that comes up. Okay? Be it wanting to invade a country, or when you have the situation where ICE is carrying out a raid and they end up making a more of a hit than they do anything else. Okay? And I say that because there's a disconnect between what is civil in America, what used to be civil in America, and the requests. And what used to stand in the gap would be law. Also, what used to stand in gap would be the political party. Both parties used to stand in the gap, and even more so, the ones who proclaimed it the most were Republicans. They were the law and order party. And yet, they recognized civil authority, civil obedience, civil conducting civil business, if you will. They used to. But I'm going to go back to the disconnect. When you have an incident that happens and there's an obvious disconnect between the cabinet, head members, and who gets to be the spokesperson on this one, announcing it or whatever it is, there's a disconnect when the president obviously weighs in. I'm not sure where it is. And whether they tell him everything, whatever he's watching, or whether the disconnect is on the Project 2025 playbook that supposedly your administration, your cabinet members are going by, there's an obvious disconnect. Because there's something that is normally not told the general public in any incident, and it doesn't matter the past administrations, and this one is definitely obvious. Okay? There's something that is not they say they're transparent, but I don't know that they're transparent about within themselves. Whether someone's being kept in a bubble, like the president, or someone's feeding misinformation. We know that exists. And so possibly there's a disconnect there. When you start feeding wrong information that you call or as legal and lawful, when you start feeding that information out to the members that are actually running the show, they're going to run the show incorrectly, undemocratically. But when they have to answer to it, anybody that's kind of looking at the bigger picture Some people will look at them like they're crazy or idiots or whatever, and others will go, no, there's a disconnect. There's something wrong here. And that's what it is. It's a disconnect. There's a disconnection between within their own lines or the general public or just the idea of what is civil in America or what used to be civil in America. And that's what I wanted to say. It's very much going back full circle to like talking to an elderly person who you cannot convince anymore on certain little issues. And it frustrates them why they can't remember yesterday. Or it simply frustrates them because they always do this on Mondays. That's going to be the answer that keeps popping out of them. It doesn't solve the issue, but it's their only way of reasoning with things. Does that make sense? Because when you start looking at the reality of situational everyday events or incidents as they play out and those kind of things come up, you have to recognize them for what they are. Because the pain and the hurt will come later. The confusion needs to be reined in to better understand the situation because it does not get any better. It really doesn't. I hope this clarifies, as confusing as it may sound, doing this kind of in the middle of the night, and I'm tired myself. But I needed to say this for clarity and for a reason. When you listen and you watch things unfold, like the recent ICE shooting, and then the reaction, and their comments of saying transparency or who's in the right and all that. When you start watching these things and then you see the reactions of the heads of state as opposed to the president himself, and you all of a sudden get this question mark, that's what you're seeing. If you're following it, you get a question mark that won't answer itself. It's a disconnect on their end. And it needs to be called out by we the people. I got nothing but love for you. Have a great week.